color of the blood that flows down the face of one who loves us so.
Thank you for joining us again. This is lesson number 6 in our special series of Street Level Messiah. Today we're going to talk about forgiveness, and it's hard to separate Jesus and forgiveness in any respect, and that's really the basis of where we're going to go in our lesson. I want you again to turn over to the back of your sheet and you look down at the further study section on the back. And the first thing we're going to look at and talk a little bit about is Luke chapter 5, verse 17 and forward, when Jesus and this paralytic man. So, Dan, what do you have to say about it? What do you think?
All right, so in Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 17, it's the story of the men who bring their friend to Jesus. And as we're studying this lesson, obviously we are talking about forgiveness, and Jesus is going to make a statement in verse 20, "Man, your sins are forgiven you." Now that, just so you know the background, that may not be the focus of this text. There's a reason he says that,
Right.
and we maybe could save the Pharisees for another day's discussion. But as you just mentioned about, you really can't separate Jesus from the concept of forgiveness. That's why he came. That's why he's here. And as you look at this story, I'll read it, and then I want to throw it back to you about I want to know Jody's take on how you picture the scenario here. So let's start in verse 17. "Now it happened on a certain day as he was teaching that there were Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting by, who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. Then behold, men brought on a bed a man who was paralyzed, whom they sought to bring in and lay before him. And when they could not find how they might bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on top of the housetop and let him down with his bed through the tiling in the midst before Jesus." So we're going to be talking about forgiveness.
Right.
We're going to talk about maybe even how much we need forgiveness. But before we even get there, to use this story, what's your image here? Paint the picture.
Well, one of the things that I like to try to do, and I've mentioned before, is just to try to sit as if I was there and what I would see. And first of all, he starts out, these people have come from all over. Jesus is in the house. They've come from different areas, the Pharisees and teachers of the law. So there's a pressing crowd. They filled up the house. Actually, as you read on, they're spilling out of the house. They're outside the house, apparently listening through the doorways, the windows, whatever. Trying to follow this, and here is this man who has 4 obviously very good friends, but that they go to such lengths. They carry him on a bed or a pallet of some kind, carry him. I don't know how far away he lived from this house, but they carry him all the way there. He's paralyzed. He can't do this on his own. They try to work their way through the crowd. They can't get up to the door. They can't get up to the window. They can't. So finally they climb up on top of the roof. And they have to carry him up on top of the roof as well. Then they break up the roof. Mark tells us in Mark chapter 2, his account is they broke through the roof, and then they lower him down, apparently on some kind of ropes or something to that effect. I mean, this is an amazing scene. I don't know how long it took them to break through the roof, but I'm just trying to picture Jesus teaching in this room, all these people, and maybe debris starts to fall down or whatever, and finally now a shaft of light comes through and opens up, and then the next thing you see is this guy being lowered down on a bed. It's just an amazing scene to see what they go through for their friend. For healing, they're not seeking forgiveness, it doesn't appear.
No.
Yeah, they just want him to be healed. And yet then, as you said, Jesus starts out with that stark statement, "Man, your sins are forgiven you."
And I know the way the text goes about why he says that. He even reads their thoughts. And hey, here's the basic question for the Pharisees is, he really is God or he's blaspheming?
Right.
To make a statement like, "Your sins are forgiven you," he's either God or he's, and so we get all that reaction. I guess where I want to go in my mind to make this personal for me and for our applications here is, if forgiveness is what Jesus is all about, you said again, you cannot separate Jesus from forgiveness. If that's what he came to give us, to set us free, what was broken in the garden, our own personal sins, every time we sin now we stand guilty before God. If he came to bring forgiveness, I wonder, am I as hungry for Jesus' forgiveness as these men were for Jesus' healing? Because did Jesus come to heal?
Right.
I mean, he did.
Yeah, but
And-
that's not his primary purpose. You're right.
And
right.
so, and the miracles were to get to the man to prove who he was and that his teaching was legit. And I just, when was the last time you were sitting in your office studying, or maybe in one of your small groups? I don't think it's probably happened maybe in the 6 times that one of our small groups' homes have been broken into, because
That's
people are like,
exactly
we heard you guys are having a Bible study here today, and man, we gotta,
We're going to do anything
we need some
we can
Jesus
to get inside that group. Yeah, inside that home or whatever. That's right. And they're seeking after physical healing, but the impressive thing is he gives them the physical healing, but the spiritual healing is what really is the lasting effect. As we've looked at some of the other incidents the past several weeks, and we've gone through this study, is that the spiritual healing that he brings is really seeking after their lostness when Jesus did that. And as we looked before, that's where the answers are found, the lasting answers. This man is still going to get sick with the flu or a cold or
That's
whatever
right.
later on, and his life passed at some point. But at this point, the greatest thing he could even imagine was being given this life, this being able to get up and his paralyzed limbs being healed. But he gets something even better than that.
You picking this as the last one, it's almost like the climactic finish. Why did Jesus make himself vulnerable?
Right.
So he could provide for our forgiveness.
Right.
He was so approachable. Why? Because he wants us to come to him to get access to ultimately his shed blood forgiveness. I mean, and one of the even stories, I think the extra studies about forgiveness is to even go to one of the statements he makes on the cross. Acts 13 and verse 38, as the disciples are going and preaching, they say in Acts 13:38, through this man, forgiveness of sins has been preached to you.
Right.
Why did Jesus come? Why did he make himself vulnerable? Why was he born? Why all of this? He's not going to, not that Jesus, there's not biblical principles about my finances, not that there's not biblical principles about my marriage, and Jesus touches on that. He gives us his insight, but ultimately what the street level Messiah to me is all about is he came to help me with my biggest problem.
Right.
It's because I've sinned and I need his forgiveness. And I wish I maybe saw more of myself in these 4 men than maybe what I do.
Well, and I think, that's really the crux of the matter. You're right. And that's where we bring this all home in this series, is the forgiveness and how that then affects us. And I want to, before we leave this and before we throw it back to you in your group discussion, is the passage in John 8 that we're going to look at, because this is one of the most stark passages maybe in all of the Bible, this incident. Because to get this picture of this woman who is brought before Jesus, is the best way that I can picture this is, it's like Jesus is up teaching Bible class, and there's this stir, this commotion that they hear, somebody shouting one thing, somebody shouting another, and finally this woman is thrust right in his presence and said, okay, we caught this woman in the very act of adultery. What do you say? And Jesus had every right to not be compassionate, to not be sensitive, to not make himself available. Hey man, don't you see I'm teaching Bible class? He had all of those capabilities to do just that. But this story, this incident is so amazingly, it's just a touching story, I think. And what I would encourage you, when you go back into your groups and you start discussing this, to try to set that scene like that and try to understand it from the woman's perspective, from that group who are bringing her down, from the ones he was teaching, and try to see their perspective in all of this. And then this grand conclusion that he comes to as they just thud, 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 as they drop their rocks, each one of them. And finally, it's just Jesus and this woman standing there alone. So some great things for you to think about, look at, and discuss as you get into that passage in John. And then we'll talk one more time in just a little bit. All right, well, here we are down at street level. Jesus was a street level Messiah. He came to this earth and lived for us. There weren't cars up and down the road when Jesus was here, but he lived at this street level for us, made himself available. He was authentic. He showed compassion. He was sensitive. He made himself vulnerable, and he grants us forgiveness. Now that's the message of Jesus, and what we've been encouraging you the last 6 weeks is to make that a part of your life, make that application so that you can be the Jesus to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family. We're glad you've joined us for this special series. And next week, don't forget, next week, we're going to meet back at the church building, all of us together. Going to have a special reunion. It's going to be a great class, 6 o'clock at the church building. Be sure to join us. And again, thanks for being a part of this series.
He's the perfect man, he's the Lord's own son. He's the Lamb of God, he's the only one that can give us life, that can make us grow, that can make the love between us flow.